Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're hanging out with one Larry C. Johnson. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we are with Larry Johnson. And in case you didn't know, in case you've been living under a rock, Sonar 21. That's Larry's website, and that's where you can learn all the stuff you need to learn. He's got great articles that he writes, of course, and then he has other people. Peter Hansler comes in and other people that come in and write. So Larry Johnson, Sonar 21, that's the place to go. To under 21. That's Larry's website. And hold on a second here. Where you can learn. I've got something else going on here.
Yeah, it was getting the feedback.
Yeah, but I think we killed it. Oh, okay. Let me see. Probably on YouTube. It's kind of hard these days, Larry, to figure out what the heck's going on. But I think we got that killed. Okay, we're going. Anyway, so here's an interesting article. We'll get going right away. Vladimir Putin leaves no doubt about Russia's demands to end the war in Ukraine. Do Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff understand? And here's the weird thing about it, Larry. This is not a mystery. The Russians came out before the war started. Here's a list of stuff we're concerned about. Every time they ask them, this is our list. They met the Istanbul Agreement, address the list. What do you want to do? Root concerns. No matter what happens, it's always the same thing. And then we get, some drift off into potential ceasefires and stuff. Your thoughts? Do they understand? And is that the problem? Whether or not they understand?
No, yeah, that is the problem. They're not listening. Ray McGovern's always said, if you want to know what the Russians are going to do, listen to what they say. Just listen to them. They're not trying to be clever. They're not trying to be Machiavellian. They're very, very straightforward. So Putin, the conditions that were listed by Putin at a meeting on June 14th of 2024, did a presentation to the senior officials at the foreign ministry. He laid it all out, and I list again the 6 conditions that he identified in 2024. Well, he went over them again at the press conference that he had last Friday. End of year press conference, 4.5 hours answering questions. And, they haven't budged. They have not budged from this at all. And yet the West still thinks, oh, well, we can get them to concede on territory. For example, in September of 2022, Russia held a referendum in Kherson, Zaporizhia, as well as Donetsk and Luhansk. All four former oblasts of Ukraine voted to join Russian Federation. So they're now permanently part of Russia. Putin's not giving them back. Putin doesn't have the power to give them back. It's now fully enshrined in the Russian Constitution. And the Russians have made clear, this is now Russia. We're not going back. And so the U.S. can argue all they want. Well, Russia hasn't taken all the territory in Kherson and Zaporizhia, and they still have a little bit to go in Donetsk. So, they're just too inept. Russia's going to take it militarily. They're under no rush. They actually, the 2022 started. Russia had Plan A, but they didn't really have a good Plan B. Danny Davis has said that, and their Plan A was use enough military pressure to force Ukraine to the negotiating table, which it did. And when they reached a tentative agreement in Istanbul, and then Joe Biden, Lloyd Austin, and Boris Johnson blew a gasket, warned Zelensky, don't do this, continue the war. And the war continued, it escalated. And then Russia said, well, okay, they had to step back. They did a partial mobilization in September. And then they've been building up their forces ever since. That's why a lot of people, and in fact, I didn't really understand or appreciate this until recently, but one of the reasons for the slowness in the Russian military progress in 2023 and 2024 was Russia would not fully mobilize its troops. It didn't have the ground forces necessary to carry out larger, more complex military operations. Now it does. And that's the reason that in 2025, we've seen such dramatic, rapid advances all across the front. And it's accelerating. It's not decelerating. So, from Russia's standpoint, they're going to they want to have a peace agreement if they can negotiate it, but they'll end this on the battlefield. And I'll say this: there will be no peace agreement. It's impossible for this reason. Let's just assume that Donald Trump agreed to everything that Putin has listed in his demands. So what? Donald Trump agrees to it. There are not 2/3 of the Senate willing to say, "Yeah, we'll back that." I mean, the level of anti-Russian sentiment in America, as you know, is very deep, very widespread. There's not a constituency here yet to support to say, "Hey, we want to be close friends with Russia." Just the opposite. Russia is presented as an evil imperialist force that Vladimir Putin is crossed between Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, and so even if Trump had an agreement with Putin, if it's not a treaty, which means it's got to be ratified by the Senate, that agreement with Trump means nothing. It has no lasting legs. So then you have to come back and say, okay, so we need to get a ratified treaty. Well, Dick Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham ain't going to sign off on the deal that is going to be satisfactory to Vladimir Putin and the Russian people. So it's like, okay, so let's just stop, kidding ourselves that, we keep this peace process alive and they're going to come to some sort of agreement. They're not going to come to agreement. Okay. That's it.
There's something else that to me you have to add. I recall numerous stories about Zelensky when he first got elected, going to the front lines and asking the Azov people or something, saying, "Oh, can you stop firing for a while we work on something?" And they said, "Leave or we'll kill you."
Yeah.
He ain't doing it. We'll hang you, we'll shoot you, we'll kill you. Here's my point. The idea, let's just say for the sake of argument, Trump said, "Yes, we got a deal." And Putin said, "Yeah, that's right." And Zelensky said, "I've seen the light. I'm signing it." And he signed it. If he went back to Kiev, they'd kill him on the spot.
Yeah,
he wouldn't live 5 minutes if he got back, number one. Number two, not only would they kill him, they would say, "We're not honoring this deal," because the truth is, Zelensky's not in charge of the military of Ukraine. He's not in charge of Ukraine. He doesn't work for Ukraine. He works for MI6 in the first place. And he couldn't deliver.
Yeah.
If he wanted to and signed it, he couldn't go back to his home country because the radical crazies, neo-Nazis, would just kill him and keep fighting until they went to glory or whatever they thought those lunatics go to.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Look, we got to figure out which Zelensky are we looking at. The sort of the popular image in the West is that Zelensky is the leader of Ukraine, and he's at the top. He's pulling the strings. He's running the show. Or I think that's wrong. I think Zelensky is a well-paid actor, and he is one of his jobs is to keep the money flowing, because is he skimmed off the top and taking a couple of billion for himself? Absolutely. But there is at least $48 billion missing. I know that several million of that has found their ways into the hands of members of the U.S. Congress, both in the Senate and the House. I guarantee you some of that money has made its way into the pockets of some European politicians. Kaya Kallas is an example. I would not be surprised to see that she's profited off of it. But then the question is, who's the powers behind the throne that are getting paid? Because this is not about democracy. This is not about some ideal purpose, glorified ideal. This is about the money. And So to that extent, Zelensky's job is keep the money flowing. And the only way you keep the money flowing is you got to keep the war going. And so to the best of their ability, they're going to try to keep it going. But, Russia's entered a new phase now. And they're in the process of isolating Odessa. They're taking out bridges into Romania. They're destroying port facilities. They're destroying petroleum refineries and oil storage tanks. I think while there are some that believe that this war could go on for another year or two, I'm skeptical of that. I think it's actually going to end much quicker than that.
Well, one of the things I think that you have to take into account is the Europeans never had the money, and they tried some trickery with stealing Russian assets that fell apart. Now they got some other trickery that they're trying, some financial trickery where they're going to like float some loans, open-ended, sell some kind of bonds. Who the hell would buy those?
Yeah.
These are bonds that say, oh yeah, you get paid back when either the Russians lose. Well, that ain't going to be work out right. I ain't buying those. Or if the Russians win, then you got to count on the EU paying you back, and they're broke. So if you buy those loans, buddy, you might as well buy, this old wrinkly piece of paper right here, because the paper will be probably more valuable. You could light a cigar with this.
Yeah,
that's just going to be digital. It'll be of no value. So even then, right now, if it worked 4 to 6 months, and Ukraine's out of money again, number one, but less than that because they're going to steal at least 50% of it. This is the last truncheon of money. They got to steal 80% of that if no more is coming. But the other part of it is, I didn't even think they can do this.
Yeah, no, it is. Right now, I know that the Department of Defense, Office of Inspector General, or Criminal Investigative Division, they're going after $48 billion that's missing, that has gone astray. So, that's a lot of money that gets paid off. It was funneled through the Baltic states, I think, primarily Estonia, which is where we get the Kaya Kallas connection. But it's made its way into banks in the Caribbean and some of the other offshore centers. The problem Ukraine has right now is it cannot sustain its ability to sustain combat operations is extremely limited. And Russia, by virtue of its, both Putin and Syrskyi agreed that there are at least 700,000 Russian soldiers on the front. If you go back to 2022, Russia went into Ukraine initially with between 125 and 160,000 troops. Well, they're now over 700,000. Ukraine at the time had 300,000 ground forces and another 900,000 in reserve. Well, they burned through all that. That's all gone. They're on probably their third or fourth generation of a military force, and they're running out of men. If they say this war of attrition continues, it can't continue indefinitely because Ukraine's only got 19 million. Russia's got 140 million. And right now, the Ukrainian losses from casualties as well as desertions, at a minimum, 60,000 a month. So that's 720,000 in a year. Are you kidding me? And they're not replacing. It's not like they got another 60, 70,000 guys signing up every month. I think last month or the month before last, it was only like 17,000 that they were able to recruit. And a lot of those recruits are not coming willingly. They're being snatched off the street and shoved in the back of a car. So yeah, there's no, the logistics don't work. The manpower doesn't work. And with Russia now they're pushing along at least 8 different spots on that line of contact, north to south. Ukraine doesn't have unlimited manpower to be able to go and reinforce each of those positions. So as they pull out to attack in one area, the Russians start advancing in those areas. If they go back to there to stop, then Russia advances. Russia's just playing it very smart and slow. They're trying to limit their casualties, which they've been very effective at. and they're inflicting massive casualties on the Ukrainians.
Well, here's the one thing that the Brits can do. I mean, NATO does have of a very, very powerful a weapon. Putin's desperate troops so short of food, they're eating each other in Ukraine. Ukraine claims Russian forces have resorted to cannibalism. There you go. Those guys, they look kind of skinny. I guess they're hungry. I don't know. They're eating each other, for God's sake. So all they got left now is you're losing on the battlefield. You're out of money. Trump's sick and tired of you. He's pushing away. Tulsi Gabbard's humiliating you and calling you a bunch of liars and warmongers. And what do? The best you can do is print an article. The Russians ran out of missiles. 3 months into the war, they ran out of missiles. Then they were using what? Shovels and washing machine chips. Yeah. And now they don't even have shovels and washing machine chips. They're literally eating each other, according to Ukraine, Larry. I mean, that's in a way, I want to laugh, but that's really all they have.
Well, you gotta wonder. This is, the psychological thing called projection. that Ukraine is projecting onto Russia what it itself is doing. Now, that the cannibalism among troops, you could understand that if you got troops like in Mirnograd who are surrounded by the Russians. They have no way of receiving food, ammunition, medical supplies, and yet they refuse to give up. Now, I don't even think they're committing cannibalism. They'll give up before they do that. But again, this kind of extreme hysterical propaganda just underscores how desperate the situation is for Ukraine, because it's so outlandish and it's so ridiculous. Another one that's circulating, is that the generals are lying, or Putin is lying to the people about the progress, that Russia really isn't making progress on the battlefield, that this is just all a lie. Okay, I stick with that story if you want. Let's see how that works out.
Well, the other part of it is, okay, I don't know about you, but I was in we were both in Moscow a few weeks back.
Yeah.
I don't know about the soldiers on the field, but I was eating pretty damn good in Moscow. The restaurants are fantastic. I had Georgian food, I had Italian food, I had Russian food. I'm supposed to believe that I go to this town and the Christmas lights are up, the people are wandering around, throwing snowballs, having fun, eating. Talk about warm. Man, my heater, I've heard people say, you go to France and different places, and some of these hotels you go to, the water is not very hot, and they don't want you to turn the heat up very high because it's very, very expensive. Man, I thought I was going to burn up. I had to open a window. They got the heat cranked up, the hot water. I'm like, this is not a bad life. So I'm supposed to believe that you go to Moscow. You go in the stores, they're packed with food. They're packed with everything. I'm like,
did you ate at Mamuka's restaurant?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, I mean, what I put on weight because of him.
Yeah. I put it like this. We weren't eating each other. Those lamb chops were pretty darn good, though. I'll say that. A lamb would be in trouble, but a person could probably make it in and out of a. But it's painting. I remember when it first started, the picture was that they found like a couple of people who were lined up at an ATM the first couple of days of the war, and they like bunched the camera in to try to make it look like it was 1,000 of people. Yeah. And then when they showed the picture, it was like 12 people.
Yeah. No, it's just, as you've seen. Did you get down to the Hotel Metropole by chance?
Yes, I did. I had dinner there. Oh, what a beautiful place.
Did you get to, did Scott take you across the plaza to the Italian restaurant, Bottega Siciliana?
I think we went with what's that guy, Doctor? Maybe the guy that writes for you. There's a guy.
Peter Hansler.
Yes, Peter Hansler. We went with him. Yes, to the Italian restaurant.
Well, you went to his Italian restaurant. There's an Italian restaurant directly across the plaza from the front entrance to the Hotel Metropole. Called Bottega Siciliana. Best pizza I've ever had. I would go back to Moscow just to eat at that restaurant. Okay. So,
But
no,
I'm supposed to believe that
you're
the
right.
troops are starving.
Yeah, they're having to eat each other because all the people in Moscow are too busy chowing down on pizza and Georgian food. I mean, come on, stop. It's so ridiculous.
Well, it really is because I've had friends. I was just talking to some friends the other day in London and outside of London, and they're like, "We're getting the hell out of the UK." They're like, "We're moving, we're leaving. We can't take it anymore. This place is a hellhole. It's dirty, it's filthy, it's crime. We're stepping over homeless people with tents on the street. Everything's expensive." Let me add this. The expenses, I mean, as far as you can go to a very nice restaurants, nice places. I was in the hotel I was in was a very nice hotel, 24 hours, a restaurant. And you call down there and I'm ordering salmon and this and that. How much? It was like 25 bucks.
Yeah.
I'm like, in a restaurant like this in New York, you just spent $150 for a late night dinner with salmon and all kinds of stuff like that. It was like, so even the people are in Moscow. I talked to people about the cost of their hotel. I mean, the cost of rent and things like that. People are living there. The rent's reasonable. They're working. They have the economy strong. They can afford food. One guy told me he had a beautiful home, and he said he was switching from electric to gas. And I said, why? He said, because gas is 5 times cheaper than electric because we got so much gas, they sell it to us, the people there. And I'm like, man, the people, it appears to me that the people in Russia are now actually living better than the people in Europe.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Do you realize if you had to list the top, the largest 5 cities in terms of population in Europe, you know what the number 1 city is?
What's that?
Moscow. That's how, I mean, when you ask about Europe, they list
Moscow,
and St. Petersburg is like the 5th largest.
Yeah.
So, it's larger than Berlin, London, Paris, Rome, list your, but Russia's in the process of divorcing itself from being considered part of Europe. I think they recognize, or at least I know Sergei Karaganov, he's a leading, I don't want to call him a political scientist because that's sort of insulting. There's the Metropole.
Hotel Metropole. Oh boy, they got it rough there in Moscow. I don't know how they're making it, eating at each other in restaurants like this.
Yeah, that's it's set up for breakfast there.
Yeah, exactly. That's a difficult life they're living in there. I don't know how they're making it.
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I got to stay there probably 3 or 4 times so far. It's just amazing. The Europeans have so alienated the Russians that no longer, let's go back 150 years. You could make the case 150 years ago that Europe really was sort of a power center of the world. It was an industrial center. The Industrial Revolution really started in Europe and spread around the globe. It was a military power. And it was a center of science and technology. The Einsteins and when you go back and look at the scientific discoveries of the 19th century, a lot of it's centered in Europe. Today, they're nothing. They're no longer relevant. The only thing they're close to being relevant on is the banking system, the City of London. But you take out the money, all of a sudden Europe is no longer relevant. They're not a military power. They're not a scientific or technological giant by any stretch. That's disappeared. They don't have anything comparable to Silicon Valley or what the Chinese have. Militarily, they're a joke. And they don't have any great natural resources. No countries are lining up to say, hey, even it used to be French wine was, at the top of the list. Yeah. Now you got South Africans making wine. You got Argentines making wine. New Zealand makes great wine. Australia makes wine. California, so the French wine.
Georgia.
Georgian wine. Exactly. Again, what do you need from Europe? Nothing.
Yeah,
So
I know they were like big on cheese. I was in Belarus, and Belarus has this huge dairy industry now where they're making all these great cheeses. And and they screw themselves because where now someone in Russia may say, oh, I want to get this, great French cheese and this kind of cheese, blah, blah, blah. And now they've got a sister state in Belarus. And
yeah,
when they say, oh, we won't sell it to you from France, what does Belarus say? Okay, well, great. We got all the dairy and cheese in the world. Now
yeah.
you can get it from next door. I mean, it's like you talk about shooting yourself in the foot. I think it was Viktor Orban that said, "No, we shot ourselves in the lungs."
Yeah, yeah. No, that's very true. Um, that's why it's good. It is not that Europe is in no position to leverage pressure Russia, and all they can offer Russia is, okay, we'll leave you alone. We'll mind our own business. We'll keep our hands to ourselves. That's all they could do,
Yeah,
and they're
and
unwilling to do. They're unwilling to do that.
I was about to say you can't even trust them to do that. And you know what the sad part of it is? I think every time you turn around, you read something about the Poles, griping with the Germans or the French now and the Germans. You can't even if they can't fight the Russians, those lunatics will fight amongst themselves. I'm not
Yeah,
saying the people of those countries. I'm saying the leaders of France, Germany, and England. If they
right.
can't fight Russia, they'll end up starting a world war where they fight themselves.
Yeah, what's so if you step back to get sort of the panoramic view of history. So what made Europe sort of distinct was its embrace of Christianity. And then with the rise of the protest movement, the Protestants, then you had this division, religious division, first between Catholicism and Protestantism, and at the same time between Catholicism and the Church of England coming up and just going its own way. And so then here you got all these people all professing to be followers of Jesus. We all love Jesus, but man, we can't wait to go to war with one another. So, England and France fought, ostensible Christian countries. And then England and France fought Germany, at least, twice in the 20th century. And so here are all these so-called Christian nations busy slaughtering each other.
And
And
God only knows what the British did to the Irish, for God's sake.
well, yeah, yeah,
Oh, they treated them as bad as they treated anybody on earth.
exactly. So, the odd thing is that while the religion sort of was central to the identity of Europe, as witnessed by all the various cathedrals that are, seen and celebrated from Rome to Paris to Berlin. Nonetheless, they're losing that mojo.
Mhm.
It is no longer. It's really a thing of the past. The religious part is disappearing. They're getting folded into other cultures, other traditions, and once Europe loses its identity, then its ability to stay unified to go fight Russia, is non-existent.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I don't remember if it was von Clausewitz, but someone said, in order to maintain a war, you need three things. And it was like industry, economy, and unity.
Hmm.
Have you ever heard that? And they said, well, if you only had to choose one, which one would it be? And he said, unity. You
Yeah.
got to have the people together. For God's sake, that's they have no unity. What do you think about a couple of things? Let me throw them at you. Mark Rutte, oh, we got to be ready to fight the Russians any day. Oh, we've got to sacrifice our children. Oh, this kind of silly rhetoric.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, recently, we hear Macron say, perhaps we should talk with the Russians. And we hear Boris Pistorius coming out saying, well, I'm with Tulsi. The Russians don't want to attack them. It seems like there's some people kind of backing off this. Maybe they're seeing the writing on the wall. Maybe they realize they can't get the money. I don't know. What do you think's going on with that?
Yeah, no, I think it's really the growing recognition that Russia is going to prevail, and like any victor, they're in a position to impose new rules. And Europe, economically, doesn't have a viable alternative that offers where they pay less for energy and then can boost their own economies. They're experiencing now the consequences of paying higher energy costs, which is killing their industries. What's left of them. Um, at some point, then I guess Europe can still feed itself, sort of, but they are, they have been somewhat dependent upon grain shipments out of Ukraine. But that's where Russia's. I think Russia's now in the process of shutting down Odessa and Nikolaev as ports that can be used to transport anything out of Ukraine to Europe. So Europe's they're going to have to come to wake up from their nightmare where they've pretended that they could live without Russia, and I think they're going to discover they can't. They need Russia, but the irony there is Russia doesn't need them. So,
well, I'd have to say this, having talked to people in Russia, and I know you know the same. The Russians are not amused with the way they've been treated the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And they ain't going to soon forget. Not that the Russians want to attack them or anything, but I think at some point, even if, I don't know, some other parties take over and they come back to the Russians, hey, we want to make some deals and start. I think the Russians are going to be like, I'm sorry. That eagle that faces in whatever that faces in both ways, both heads are going to come around and face to the east. I think they're going to be pretty much saying, look, we don't want to really do business with you. We'll sell you some stuff at market price, maybe with a markup, but the days of getting your natural resources from Russia at a discount are over. That really, I don't think Russia's really going to want much to do with them other than let's do some kind of security or guarantee or something that we write up where we don't attack anyone. And other than that, you go on with your lives. We don't want anything. I think of Russia, this is a unequivocal divorce, whatever you want to call it. Russia's done.
Yeah. That I don't know if you followed much the writings of Sergei Karaganov, or if you know who Karaganov is. So at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, at least the one I know that it took place in 2024. At the end of the forum, there's this, final press conference session with Putin, and Karaganov is the one that narrates that. Right. He's the moderator. But Sergei he was the one that initially proposed, said, hey, look, that the future of Russia is in the East. It's not in the West. So we no longer have to worry about being part of dependent upon Europe. The time to be dependent upon Europe, to have a relationship with Europe, is past. We're more Asian than we are European. That's sort of the what he's promoted in his writings. Now he's like the head of the new economics school, which is it's actually in some ways outpaced Moscow State University. So it's like an Ivy League school in reputation within Russia. And he's emphasizing that, the future of Russia lies in Siberia. It lies with China. It lies with India. And, if you would have done a survey of Russians 4 years ago, before the start of the military operation, you might have found that there was not necessarily a majority support for that kind of position, but there is now. And Russia has awakened to the fact that what do they need from the West? They don't need anything. There was that period, you and I are old enough to remember back in the late 60s and into the 70s, where, the Russian kids at the time, man, they wanted to wear blue jeans and they rock music, and they were very attracted to Western culture. And it was a thing. United States really enjoyed respect, and it was seen as something to be emulated. Not now. My God, we've become a freak show. And the Russians they're finding their own way, creating their own culture, and becoming, closer to places, to the Chinese and to the Indians.
I do recall this. I recall Macron going to France and Xi telling him, look, you guys are just a bunch of vassals. We'd be happy to negotiate with you, your deal with you as the leader of France. People as an individual country should come here and make a deal with us. And I remember Putin saying before this war, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I reported on it. Look, why don't we sit down individual? If you got a country and we want a deal, sit down and talk about a deal. He was basically saying this EU stuff doesn't benefit you or me.
Right.
And now if you read the national security strategy, for all of its holes, one of the things that it says is that, you guys need to get your sovereignty and make deals on your own. I suspect when this is said and done, Fico in Slovakia, our guy Orban, maybe the Czech people, various countries around that have been there will be able to, they'll be on the phone with Putin. Hey, what about our, gas, what have you? And the Russians are going to be like, hey, we got trust, we've got deals, fine.
Yeah.
But as far as the EU, which I don't see how the EU or even NATO really survives in their current forms, who's going to make a deal with those people? They're going to have to make individual deals as sovereign countries, and they're not sovereign as long as they've got this supranational fascist totalitarian thing called the EU.
Well, and in fact, I think one thing maybe they're undoing is if, as I suspect, there have been literally a couple of $1 billion flowing into the pockets of the EU leaders like Kaja Kallas, like von der Leyen, that's going to further undermine their credibility because people will see that they were just out on the take for themselves. So that's going to be something that may wreck the ability of the EU to continue to operate, because increasingly, as we're seeing, there are a smaller number of countries, but significant nonetheless, that are saying, "Hey, we're not getting anything out of this deal. It's too costly, and it's intruding upon our national rights."
And here's the other part. When I don't use words like fascist and totalitarianism just for effect, totalitarian for effect. This Jacques Baud thing, and there's another lady named Yam or something. I think she was Cameroonian. She was first, and now you got Jacques Baud, where they have people who simply exercising their rights as journalists to their best ability to say, I want to do truthful journalism. I want to do analysis based on facts and let the chips fall where they may. And they're like, they came up with some cockamamie claims where they didn't even really accuse them of anything. Oh, you're repeating something that's attributable to the Kremlin.
Right.
I don't know what that means. I mean, it's really frightening. Well, I wouldn't go to Europe right now myself. I don't know about you.
No, I'm with you. Did you get a chance to listen? Danny Davis did a great interview yesterday with Jacques. And I mean, let's go back to the era of the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, if you were a Soviet dissident, you would get taken to court at least. You would have a defense attorney. Even if the trial was rigged, you'd get convicted and you'd be, sent to prison or sent to Siberia. They wouldn't starve you to death. What's happened to Jacques is they've now frozen his bank accounts, so he can't get access to money. And he said, if anybody gives him money, like to buy food, they'll be accused of violating sanctions. So these damn Europeans have set up this bizarre system that is so far outside the law that it violates every tenet of human rights that are enshrined in the United Nations Charter. I mean, it is an evil. The EU needs to be destroyed. It needs to be taken apart, dismantled. It's a totalitarian institution. It's fortunate it doesn't have an army, and
yes,
fortunate it doesn't really have a police force to speak of. But by God, the dictates that come out of it, and it's looking to require other states to enforce its decrees. It is simply outrageous. It was Danny Davis talking about it, man. He was getting madder and madder by the moment.
It
Jacques,
infuriates
Jacques,
you.
yeah, Jacques sort of was, he's trying to handle it in a good natured way, but he really is not. He's such a gentleman.
Europe, through the EU at least, has returned to the Dark Ages. This
Yeah.
is not a modern governmental structure as we understand it today. This is not a modern, this is not where there's some, even, they don't even try to pretend that there's a semblance of rules. In fact, it was reported that and I've heard this from several different places where when they were trying to steal the Russian assets, and there were people that were advising the leaders, look, they'll take us to court, and
Mhm.
they've got a strong case, and that Kaya Kallas said no court in Europe would dare to rule against us. Dare. In other words, well, I don't care if they're right. If they know if they rule against us, they will pay. Will sanction them.
Yeah,
They'll be
yeah,
punished themselves. Man, that woman is
yeah.
who's stepping. She's a fit real well in Western Ukraine. I'll put it like that.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're exactly right. It is this kind of. We haven't seen this kind of abuse of power, where it's just so arbitrary and so devoid of facts. No, she's a bad person.
I know you got to go in by
Well,
saying.
no, I was mistaken on my time. I got a few more minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, to watch. Okay, I go to Moscow and I come back, and needless to say, when people, oh, where do you? I went to Moscow. Some of the like liberal people, or whatever, that are like, you went to Moscow. Yeah. Was that scary? And I'd be like, man, what would be
Yeah,
scary about that? The crime was low, the food was good, the prices were reasonable. What was scary? And they're shocked, and they're like, yeah, but when they come here for what? And you talk to the people there. It's interesting. I would go by and there was a blue light on, and the police had somebody pulled over. And so I asked like the people there, well, what's your relationship with the police? And they were like, they didn't even understand what I meant.
yeah,
Like it's not an adverse, like, oh, the police are out to get us, or we're afraid of the police, or we're not afraid. They didn't even understand. Their perspective is the police are here to do their job, and they're here to keep things orderly, and they're respectful of you, and they weren't afraid they were going to be dragged out and beaten. They treat this, there's this mentality here that this is some kind of brutal totalitarian society. When you talk to the people there, they respect their government. They feel connected to their government. They're extremely patriotic, and they respect. One guy showed me this app, and you know what it was?
no,
They had a big pothole in their community, and he takes a picture of the pothole and he uploads it to this government site. And he said, well, it took them about a week, to be honest. He said, but they came out and fixed it.
yeah,
So they
yeah,
have a connection, like, okay, they're here to do their thing. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Pothole around
yeah.
here.
Yeah, I mean, look, the trash gets picked up, the streets are clean. Yeah, how frequently did you see any police? Yeah, I because
Yeah.
rarely do you see any police on the streets except the only time I did was when I was there with Napolitano for the RT 20th anniversary,
Mm-hmm.
and um, the uh, because the event was taking at the place at the Bolshoi, which is across the street from the
Right.
Metropole. They did have a lot of out, police and military out to secure the area because it was, I think they were expecting it could be a possible terrorist target. But you get away from an area like that, you just don't see police on the streets. I mean, if go to New York City and you got one on every block, it seems.
Yeah, and it's just the connection that they have is very, very different. So what do you think about this business about the finances in Europe and the attempt to finance it? I mean, as soon as the Trump people said we are not paying anymore, I just thought to myself, they don't have it at all. I think they're trying all kind of magical ways to get it, but I think we could see a circumstance within the next few weeks to a month. They're trying to do some kind of bonds.
Yeah.
What happens if that doesn't work? And I don't
Well,
think it will.
yeah, no, you're right. It's not going to work. Number one, but what they came up against was Belgium, Belgium's role as a clearinghouse, a place. There think of them like a storage center for money.
Right.
And so you sign a contract, say, hey, I'm going to park all my gold with you, or my silver, or whatever that you have a value, and so that you'll have access to it whenever you need access to it, but B, it's protected. Nobody's going to run off with it. Well, then what Kaya Kallas and von der Leyen were trying to pull off was to to go to the owner of that facility and say, okay, hey, we want to go into that room over there that is owned by Russia, and we want to take all of their money. Now, if the owner of that facility says, okay, then right away, everybody else who's got stuff in that, values stored there, they're going to go, whoa, wait a second. It's not safe. It's not protected. So I'm going to go over and get my stuff and get my money and take it elsewhere. And that's exactly what the owners of Euroclear were scared to death of. And so they said, no, you're not doing this. We're not going to play along with it. We protect assets. And if we stop protecting assets, we lose our entire reason for being. So that's left really, this was Friedrich Merz. I talked to Pepe Escobar earlier, and Pepe said, this was a German thing, because you think about it, the ones pushing it were von der Leyen and Merz. And so even the French finally said, Macron goes, we're not doing that. So that has fallen apart. And now, they want to get a $90 billion loan grant to Ukraine. Good luck with that. France's debt to GDP ratio right now is like 117%. England has crossed above 100%. Germany is, they had 3 years ago, I think they had like a 30% debt to GDP ratio. It's now up around 85%. They're heading towards 100%. So there is no economic strength anymore in Europe. So they've got themselves in a real bind.
It seems to me that in reality, if they need to get this 90 billion, if they need to get it, the only country that really kind of has the economic wherewithal to get it would be Germany.
Mm-hmm.
That Germany could get it, but it'd be all theirs. Germany could get it, but it would be all, basically Germany would now finance a $90 billion, knowing that they will never see a penny of it back.
Yeah.
It'd be Germany taking $90 billion out, knowing they'll never see a penny of it back, and hand it to Ukraine. Now, I'm not sure that Merz wouldn't do that if he could get away with it.
Well, Merz might be on the receiving end of some of the money.
Well,
you get some kickbacks.
But I don't think he could push it through. I don't think that the economic powers in Germany, the German banks, would go along with that. Personally,
right.
I don't think so. So I think we're going to look at a couple months. Maybe they're starting to talk a little differently. I also read that the Russians, and I think this was smart, I think it was Sergei Ryabkov that said, we're willing to sign a document, like a non-aggression document. I think between Tulsi Gabbard and what the Russians are saying, I think it's coordinated to pull the rug out from under that argument that the crazies are trying to make, that Russia's going to attack us, therefore we got to get ready to be, and this is all about saving ourselves from the Russians. I think Tulsi Gabbard exposing the lie, along with the Russians saying, okay, well, we'll sign a non-aggression treaty. I think that really screws the people that are pushing that, and without that, do they really have anything else?
Well, how can the Russians attack when they're starving and having to eat each other?
Exactly.
Or gives new expression to the insult used as a teenager. Hey, eat me.
Right.
Okay,
yeah.
I will. They call it the Hannibal Lecter Battalion. Yeah. Would you like some fava beans and Chianti with that?
It never makes sense. None of it ever made sense. They're out of missiles.
Yeah.
They're out of chips. They got to use washing machine chips. Now they're out of food, but we have to prepare because they're going to attack us with no food, no missiles, no nothing. They're poor. Oh, I forgot, their economy's collapsing. Vladimir Putin has stomach cancer, Parkinson's disease, and brain. Yeah, he's got every disease known to man. I don't know how he's still standing upright with all the cancers and all the various diseases that he has also.
Yeah. Well, the Russians are marching on Rome. They want pizza.
Right. I
Well,
think
yeah,
that is correct. Well, let
yeah,
me, if I can get back to Sonar 21, everyone, our guy, Larry, has a great website, and the website is called Sonar 21. You just go to sonar21.com. He's got a lot of great things. No treaty, no deal. I like that. Bob Marley.
yeah.
This is New York Times weirdly publishing a bizarre propaganda piece about Putin. That's a given. Then we've got Peter Hansler here with stuff written. And some announcements. So always go to Sonar 21. Check it daily. Also, here's something that's important. See that little support us thing? That's important because the people that do this stuff, nobody's like making a fortune here. Like nobody's making much of anything if you want the truth.
Yeah.
So you can go PayPal, PayShoot, Patreon, buy me a coffee, and help Larry Johnson keep Sonar 21 going so that we can all partake of this fine information. Larry, thanks a lot. Certainly appreciate it, man. And I hope sometimes we can get to Moscow at the same time and hang out.
Yeah, I miss being able to see you there, but I appreciate all the good work you do there, brother Nixon.
All right, thanks a lot. All right, everybody, don't forget, share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.